Well, good evening. I'm so glad that you're here to join us for this special event. I'm Jeremy Strickler, an associate professor in the Department of Political Science and Public Service. Tonight's event is the first of several that will be held over the next month as part of the election preparation series, coordinated in collaboration between Mocs Go Vote, a committee of faculty, staff, and students aimed at increasing civic participation on campus, and the Office of the Provost. As we approach a critical time in our democratic process, it is important that our university community explore ways to increase civic participation, foster productive dialogue, and find common ground. Tonight's event highlights the role of higher education in promoting civil discourse and engaging diverse perspectives and the value of understanding opposing views in a polarized world. Subsequent events will focus specifically on the dynamics of the 2024 election and its outcome. Next Wednesday, the 16th, at noon, here in the UC auditorium, I will be joined by my colleague in the Department of Political Science and Public Service, Dr. Chris Acuff, for a discussion of election administration and voting rights. The following Wednesday, the 23rd, again here at 12, my colleague Dr. Sarah Heiss and I will be speaking about the insights of current election polling and the state of the presidential and congressional races 2 weeks out from the election. Then we have two tentatively scheduled post-election roundup events scheduled for November 6th and the 20th. More information on those events are forthcoming. For general information regarding civic engagement events on campus, please visit UTC's website, where you will find a tab linking to the Mocs Go Vote page, and you can find it on the front page of UTC's website. I'm joined on stage here tonight by Jim Hicks, Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs and Dean of Students, Michelle Deerdorf, Adolph S. Ochs Professor of Government in the Department of Political Science and Public Service, Lucy Schultz, Associate Lecturer of Philosophy and Religion and Co-Director of Environmental Studies, and Ruth Walker, Assistant Professor of Psychology, and she holds a leadership position in the League of Women Voters. Our purpose here tonight is to discuss tools for dialogue in our polarized era. The closely and bitterly contested election we are experiencing refracts and distorts many complicated issues important to Americans, from immigration and racial and economic inequality to abortion, gun violence, and the state of democracy itself. The dominant narrative is that we are too intractably divided to adequately address the many problems before us. The culprit, we are told, is polarization. Yet, within my field of political science, the phenomenon of polarization is carefully analyzed, with research indicating that Americans may not be as polarized as we are led to believe. To be sure, at the level of political elites, polarization does occur, but more directly as a strategy to manufacture and appeal to partisan and ideological divides. Of course, the United States has experienced partisan and ideological polarization in the past. What is different today, however, is affective polarization, a phenomenon characterized by distrust and negative views about those on the other side, separate from any disagreements we might have over policy. As a form of tribalism, we are increasingly viewing members of the other party as bad faith actors who are close-minded, unintelligent, and immoral. Tension between political parties has reduced government compromise, fostered distrust in government, prevented friendships, and erupted into violence. Most troubling, scholars of comparative government warn that such pernicious polarization can destabilize the principles and institutions of democracy. Fortunately, civil discourse, which is constructive and fact-based when paired with thoughtful listening, can act as a tool to repair democracy and renew citizens' commitment to its persistence. More than any institution, higher education is a space where students can learn the values and practice of civil discourse. Beyond the national headlines of higher education in crisis, faculty and students cultivate community and belonging every day in the classroom. As reflected in our current strategic plan, UTC's stated values include a commitment to diversity and inclusion and to live with integrity and civility. Our general education curriculum includes dedicated courses directed at individual and global citizenship with the purpose of, quote, assessing multiple perspectives and experiences, and demonstrating intercultural knowledge and competencies. The panelists next to me on the stage will speak to you about how they understand and incorporate these values in their work on behalf of you, the students. It is our hope that by promoting civil discourse in the classroom, each of you will internalize civil discourse as an important norm for discussion beyond the classroom. Our shared commitment to democracy will be better for it. After our panelists provide their remarks, we'd love to open it up for a conversation through Q&A. And I will also note, feel free to get up and get snacks, as long as you do it quietly, but that's fine. With that, I would like to introduce Dean Hicks.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here to talk a little bit about what we do and how we frame kind of this on UTC's campus. When I talk to students and parents at orientation, I share with them what a wonderful thing it is that we have an institution where people from different backgrounds and from different places can come to a place that's designed to put them in one place and challenge each other and talk about big ideas. But we do need to do that in a way that is cordial to one another, or at least we listen to one another. Maybe cordial is the wrong word. And so what we do in the Dean of Students office, and what we try to encourage is create a space that is safe for our students. I have two kind of different, I think, missions in one of our in like student conduct in the Dean of Students office that some people see as in conflict with one another, but I don't. We are here to make sure that we respect one another, that our student code of conduct is designed to protect and create a safe environment. And then we also have a series of rights that students have, and that we also see ourselves as advocates for those rights. And so when we deal with conflict in the classroom, we're always talking about, how talking with students and faculty, how do we encourage both that, the reinforcement of the rights that you have as students to voice your opinion, and do it in a way that does not involve harassment and those types of things that are against our code of conduct. And so we try very hard to do that. We work with SGA very carefully. We work with faculty in their classroom. We talk with students that may come close to that line every once in a while. And we work with our organizations that want to sponsor events on campus. We even work with our street preachers when they decide to come close to campus, and we talk with them about our policies and procedures. So the institution is a place where we want students and faculty to come and challenge each other, and do that in a way that advances truth and learning, and also do that in a way that respects one another and abides by the code that we all agreed to when we came in to work or live or learn here. And to whatever extent we can do that to help you as students or faculty and staff, we certainly want to be able to do that in our office.
So I've been asked to talk about one particular class that I teach, but I want to say that this class is in the context of a larger departmental curriculum designed to help our students think about how to talk to each other across the political divide. So I'm a political scientist, and so as you can imagine, in the political science major, as I know many of you are out there, it's a discipline where we have strong opinions, and we disagree with each other a lot. And sometimes students disagree with faculty, and sometimes faculty disagree with students. But we've worked very hard, I think, to create a curriculum that helps us think about what the purpose of those disagreements are and on what grounds we disagree. So this is something I think as a department we've been very deliberate about, very thoughtful about, very careful about. I would talk about this for hours if anybody's interested in how we did it, why we did it, and what it looks like. And then I would also say I teach law and philosophy. So for my entire career, my life has been teaching abortion. Not how to, but the debate around abortion, flag burning, you name the issue of the day, that's what we talk about in constitutional law, that's what we talk about in American political thought, that's what we talk about in American government, because these are the issues that kind of help us think about where we are as citizens and how we frame the world and where those disagreements come from and what the implications are. So I'm going to tell you about this. It's a 1-credit-hour course called Talking Across the Political Divide that I've been teaching. I think the first time I taught it was in spring of 2021, because it ended up being online. But it came about in December of 2017 when I was contacted. So this is after the 2016 election. We've had a year. Disagreements were getting stronger and stronger across campus and communities and students going back home. And I got a phone call from some students at Macaulay, this is a residential high school in town. And these were students who, were getting ready to go home for Thanksgiving. That's when they initially contacted me. And they were worried about how that was going to go. What kind of conversations were they going to have with their family? How ugly was this going to get? If they disagreed with mom and dad, how do you disagree with people you love? And what was that going to look like? And they wondered if that was something we could all talk about, because they figured we'd have more experience with that at the university level than they might at their institution. And so we ended up pulling together a panel of students. The Political Science Club was involved, the College Dems and the College Republicans. We try very hard to advise them out of our department because equal play for everyone, we want an equal field. And we ended up having a panel, and ended up being the very last day of class. I mean, think about this, December, last day of class, 2017, right before finals. And we filled Chattanooga Room A. I mean, front to back. It was community people, it was people from campus. I had to shut it down after 2.5 hours because people needed to go study for finals. And it told me how deeply this hit people, and not just students, just everyone. How do we have these conversations with people we care about that we fundamentally disagree with? And it's something probably all of us have experience doing. And so it got me thinking, how do we inculcate these skills? How do we build these skills in people so they have the confidence and the comfort of doing it, of being able to say what they really believe and still maintain relationships with people? And so I'm going to tell you about the course I ended up developing. I've now offered it, I want to say 4 or 5 times, from usually in the spring. Freshmen through grad students have taken it. I've done it online, I've done it face-to-face, and now I'm doing it as an Amphi, a first-year class for new freshmen, and we'll talk about that. So the purpose of it, as I found a book, when I started thinking I needed to do this, I kind of looked at what resources were out there, and I found a book by Tanya Israel, and it's called Beyond Your Bubble. And it's designed with specific exercises and homework, and it's very conversational. It was designed for people to kind of work through on their own and build skills. And so that's what I started using. The clear purpose of the course was to get students confident in these skills, with the very last thing being having another conversation with the person that it went so poorly with the first time. The reason why they decided to take the class. That they were going to have that conversation, and then we were going to come back and talk about it. So the practice, we have in-class exercises, we have take-home exercises where they kind of think through motivation. Why do they want to have this conversation? When does the conversation start going badly? What could they do differently? And then practice skills to be able to pivot that conversation. It's gone very well, I have to say. In part, we also have practice, and I want to talk about this. There's a group called Unify America. And this is kind of a national organization that's designed to have these conversations, particularly for college students. And so they have a college bowl, they have a number of programs where students sign up, they're matched with someone who disagrees with them, and then they walk them through a series of questions together. So it guides the conversation. The goal is to build confidence, to have this conversation with somebody else who has to do it because it's a class, so you're both vested in it going well. You have no emotional attachment to this person, and you practice it. And then at the end of the term, we have a real one of these. And throughout, there's lots of kind of nudges and talks and tips and skills. And what we found in outcome is it really is building students' confidence. They're given tools that they can use in other circumstances, and an increased willingness to hold these conversations. So the 2 things I've noticed with this Amphi course, and I noticed a couple students here from it, is, one, they're taking it in fall of their freshman year. And most of them have not had that hard point of coming home and realizing their views have changed from where their family's views are. Because that's when, some of you may remember, that's when those conversations start getting a little harder. And so I'm wrestling with, is the first semester freshman year a good time to have this class or not? And I'll ask them at the end of the semester, what do they think? And we'll see. But we may see a difference after fall break, because fall break's kind of the first test of going home. We'll see. But it's an exciting course. I'd be happy to talk about it with anyone. I'm thinking about doing a version of it for faculty and staff if they're interested, kind of like the race talks I did many years ago now. But yeah, we're going to keep trying this. But I would like to bring Unify America to campus, which will give us everyone a chance to integrate them in coursework if it works out.
Hi, everyone. So I am the psychologist on the panel. So one of the things that I was asked to talk a little bit about was cultivating empathy and just some of my experiences doing that. So I've taught a couple courses where that is something that I've had to do. So I have taught a policy and aging course before, as well as psychology of gender. And in both of those courses, there were definitely many conversations that we had to have about sensitive topics and difficult topics. And I learned that I needed to get better at this skill in the fall of 2016, which is the first year that it was my first year on tenure track, and it was my first year teaching a policy course. So yeah, it was a difficult time for everyone, the students and myself, learning how to navigate those things. And so I have grown a lot from there in terms of learning different strategies that I can use within the classroom to help us make bridging those conversations a lot more comfortable. So one of the things I just wanted to start us off with was just talking about what empathy is. And there are definitely different definitions or different types of empathy that are out there. So one is an emotional empathy where we kind of feel what other people are feeling. And then there's also a cognitive empathy where we can see things from somebody else's perspective. And so typically in the research, we're kind of focusing on that cognitive empathy, because if you have too much emotional empathy being in psychology, that can drain you a lot, particularly people in counseling. So we have to be cautious about that. But what we know about empathy is that it predicts pro-social behavior. So people who have good amounts of empathy, they're more likely to volunteer, for example. They're more likely to help others. In my research on sexual assault, they're more likely to have higher intentions to help someone who's been assaulted or may possibly be assaulted. So empathy is definitely something that doesn't develop naturally. So I am a developmental psychologist, and we start to see empathy developing in kids somewhere between 3 to 5. It starts to get stronger after age 5, where they start to be able to see things from other people's perspective and engage in those pro-social helping behaviors to help somebody else if they notice them in distress, for example. So one of the strategies that I use to cultivate empathy is really just laying a very clear foundation the first week of class. And I do that in a couple of different ways. So one is just helping students understand these different psychological concepts that impact how we react to hearing things that don't align with our own beliefs and our own experiences and the facts that we know. And so I talk about the different reactions that they're going to have, and we talk about how they're going to feel emotionally as well as cognitively to learning new information and hearing different people's perspectives. So I want to prepare them for the different emotions and things that they're going to go through, and also some of those defensive reactions that they're going to have to that, so they know that they're going to have it ahead of time, and I talk them through the research, and we do some activities based on that. I also talk about the importance of where we get our information from. We learn how to use the media bias charts, for example. We learn about nonpartisan policy institutes, about peer-reviewed research, about if we're going to talk about facts that we support it from by getting those facts from reputable sources. So we go through and we talk about what that looks like and where we can get that information from. I'm in psychology, so we talk about the American Psychological Code of Ethics, and that as psychologists and students in psychology, we are bound by this ethics code that we are not going to be biased against others, that we're going to learn about different perspectives and people so that we don't unintentionally demean or diminish anyone and we don't cause any harm. So I just remind them of that, that commitment that they have to our discipline. And then I also remind students that we're all here in a classroom because we want to learn, and what I try to do and what I ask them to do is to assume that everyone in that classroom has good intentions, that no one is intentionally saying something that might hurt somebody else. It is an opportunity for learning and for growth, and to try to approach it in that kind of a way. And then the last thing that we do is we set our classroom guidelines. And these are guidelines that they set themselves, but, and I'm gonna walk you through some of the guidelines that students in my class have come up with over the years, and just talk you through how they align with the different aspects of cultivating empathy. So when we want to cultivate empathies, for example, one of the things that we wanna do is we wanna ask questions of people. So we want to ask open-ended questions, and we want to be open to hearing what those responses are. And so some of the rules that students had come up with that very much aligned with this was to avoid accusatory language, use I statements instead of you statements, to be cautious of their tone. And one of the things that students had added to this that I really liked is to the importance of stating your intentions. So for example, they suggested, I'm asking this question to understand, just so everyone knew where they were coming from with that question. Another strategy is to engage in active listening, or in the words of my past students, to listen to understand rather than to respond. So engaging in active listening means that we are just listening to the person while they're talking about their perspective, about their experience, about whatever that is, and trying to understand their frame of reference rather than coming up with our argument that we're going to have to come back at that in some way. And some ways that you can do that are just by showing nonverbal cues, by nodding, by using open body language. And some other suggestions were to avoid interruptions and to criticize ideas and maybe behaviors, but not people. Another third way, a strategy for cultivating empathy, is to identify common ground. And so rather than focusing on differences, focusing on similarities and identifying those places where we have those common interests. So in psychology, when I was teaching policy and aging, for example, we all cared about older adults, and we knew that coming in. And so that was a place where we could all come together. And when we were analyzing a policy or a candidate, we were really thinking about, all right, how are their policies going to impact older adults, this group that we all agree we care about? In psychology of gender, it's like we're all here to learn about gender, unless they just couldn't get into another class at that time, but we committed to that. And so that was one of our shared areas of understanding. And so throughout both of those courses, we would share stories and perspectives, and research has found that when we engage in that storytelling, that we find connections with others and we can build that common ground together as well. And then a fourth way is to expose yourself to differences. And we very much get oftentimes trapped in our silos where we're only hearing echoes of the things that we believe and we think, whether it be through social media or all of those. So if you're on TikTok, your For You page is all the things that you care about and you think. It's not giving you these outside perspectives. And so when you are in a class and you want to engage in empathy and finding those common grounds, you have to be ready to second guess yourself, be ready to question what you think you know is true, and be open to those different ideas and perspectives. And so some of my students, some of the suggestions that they had specifically was to leave space for everyone's voice and to be open to those new ideas, and then to be open to learning new information about new experiences and to work on setting aside your beliefs and your biases. And part of that is cultural humility. It's that idea that we really want to know that we don't know everything about anything, that there's always more things that we can learn, and things are changing over time. So to work to continue to educate ourselves as we go. And then the last perspective was to practice other-oriented perspective taking. So this is that engagement in trying to understand and acknowledge other people's experiences and know that someone else's stories may differ from our own, and that both can be valid and both can be true. And so one of the other suggestions that students had was to acknowledge and reflect on your discomfort, because this is an opportunity to deepen your understanding of these topics. So all of these different strategies, active listening, asking questions, using I statements, finding common ground, and being open to this new information are all strategies that we can use to engage in conversations about various political issues where not everyone might see eye to eye on.
Yes, thank you. That was really interesting, and some of the things I'm going to talk about, I feel also parallel some of the activities you have. So my name is Lucy Schultz. I'm a philosophy professor, and I'm going to be talking about using critical thinking for productive dialogue. So all of your professors teach students how to think critically in our courses because it's a necessary skill within every discipline. However, within philosophy, we offer courses that reflect specifically on the nature of truth, how it is discovered, and the arguments made in defense of various viewpoints. So critical thinking courses are common in philosophy programs, but when I arrived at UTC 5 years ago, I noticed that we weren't currently offering one. So I took it upon myself to design one and make it a part of UTC's general education curriculum. So I think it's important that students gain critical thinking skills and have the opportunity to practice them because they are absolutely essential for engaging in civil discourse in a democratic society. It's important that students gain critical thinking skills and have the opportunity to practice them. So I designed Philosophy 1110 Applied Critical Thinking with the expressed purpose of giving students a place to reflect on the value of truth in our contemporary society. So my remarks today, I'm basically just going to give an overview of that course and talk about how it prepares students to engage in productive dialogue about controversial, often polarizing topics. So the course is divided into 3 units that cover essential critical thinking and reasoning skills, and after each unit there's a series of application exercises in which students have the opportunity to apply these skills to a given hot-button contemporary issue. So Unit 1 covers foundations of reason and argumentation, and it begins by exploring what critical thinking is, why it matters, and why people often fail to do it. So we talk about different theories of truth, how to distinguish between facts, opinions, and beliefs, and students learn to identify the parts of arguments such as premises and conclusions, and they also just learn about how to evaluate arguments and respond to others, and distinguish between different types of logical fallacies. So the application exercises following this unit deals with the topic of abortion. So for the first assignment within this module, students must evaluate 3 common arguments, both for and against increasing access to abortion. And then they're asked to present possible counter-arguments to them. Then they watch a documentary called Speak Out, I Had an Abortion, that tells the stories of 11 women ranging in age from 21 to 85 who have received abortions for all types of reasons. And the reason why I really like showing this film is because it personalized the issue. It gives a rare glimpse into these women's lives and their reasons for seeking abortions, their feelings about it, how the decision affects their lives. And I often hear that students say that, you know, I never realized that so many people who had abortions were already mothers, or, you know, I didn't realize that, you know, people who were religious, you know, would talk to their pastors about their decision to have an abortion. So it just really kind of opens up their understanding of just what women go through when they consider that decision, and just makes them kind of more aware of like the concrete reality. So the final part of this module, students are asked to have a conversation with another person outside of the class about the ethics of abortion, and then describe how the conversation went on an online discussion forum. So for this assignment, they can choose who they want to talk to. Often it's a roommate, a coworker, a family member, but they have to take the opposing view of their conversation partner, even if that means that they have to play devil's advocate. So having read the different arguments, both for and against increasing access to abortion, and watching the film, they have a lot of information, and hopefully have the ability then to kind of inhabit the logic and the viewpoint of someone on either side of the debate. Okay, and sometimes students say that it was very easy, or, you know, sometimes that they say it was really awkward, and very few times they actually say that it got heated, but it does happen. So that's the first unit. The second unit is on critical thinking and media literacy, and this unit focuses on skills for evaluating different kinds of media and claims made by them, and a big part of this unit involves identifying various forms of biases, both within ourselves, importantly, and in the sources where we get our information. We talk about misinformation, conspiracy theories, and what some scholars have called the post-truth era, in which people choose to believe what feels right rather than what is supported by evidence. And one of the key concepts in this unit is confirmation bias, which is the tendency to notice, focus on, and give greater credence to evidence that fits with our existing beliefs. And this can also mean that we reject information that challenges what we think is true. This is a huge obstacle to critical thinking. Because you know, we have to, especially when we're in a media landscape that is shaped by algorithms that basically create a bubble that we exist within. So this unit really emphasizes lateral reading techniques and the importance of fact-checking. So the application exercise following this unit covers topics related specifically to general elections. And the first few semesters that I taught this class, we focused on the 2020 presidential elections and claims about voter fraud. But this semester I've updated this module to tackle issues mounting in the present election. So first, again, students must evaluate opposing arguments, and this time I have them consider arguments for and against expanding voter access and the rhetoric around promoting election integrity. So this is the issue about, well, you know, can you have same-day registration, or does that, you know, lead to people, you know, voting multiple times? So we look at arguments on both sides of that conversation. And then I have them do a project in which they are tasked with making a short form video evaluating at least 3 media sources on a particular topic. And this semester I've given them a list of 5 sources discussing claims about undocumented immigrants voting in the general election. So the 5 sources that I provide them range in views. Some are left-leaning, some are right-leaning, some are objective reporting, some are op-eds and opinion pieces. So the students are responsible for identifying like what kind of source is this, and then determining what the credible facts within it are. And then the students then post their videos to an online discussion forum and are encouraged to comment on each other's work. Okay, so I just want to make a shout out to Sarah Cantor, media librarian, and some of the other librarians like Dunson McNutt for their help in developing that unit in particular. They're really great. So finally, Unit 3 is titled Truth, Science, and Values, and it explores the basics of the scientific method and the relationship between science and religion. So specifically, we cover inductive reasoning, which is the process of forming theories based on empirical data. Inductive arguments make use of causal reasoning, which uncovers the relationship of cause and effect in different phenomena. And again, we go over different logical fallacies, like, for example, mistaking correlation for causation. So in this unit, we also talk about the importance of authoritative experts and the way scientific information is conveyed by the media, so tying in some of the skills acquired in Unit 2. And it ends with the discussion of the relationship between science and religion and the extent to which critical thinking is compatible with religious faith. So the application exercise for this unit tackles climate change. So I have them watch a TED Talk by Katharine Hayhoe titled, "The most important thing you can do to fight climate change is to talk about it." So it employs or provides strategies for effectively discussing this topic with others. Hayhoe is interesting because she's a climate scientist. She's the chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy, and she's a distinguished professor and political science endowed chair in public policy and public law at Texas Tech. And she's also an outspoken Christian and appeals to her faith when describing the importance of responding to climate change. So after viewing that, students watch a documentary called Merchants of Doubt, which is available through the library. Everyone should watch this documentary. It's fantastic. It explains how certain interest groups have successfully manipulated public opinion to create doubt about the reality of climate change, despite the widespread scientific consensus that it is indeed real and it is caused by human activities. So the documentary reinforces a lot of what was covered in Unit 2 about misinformation and critically evaluating media sources. So next, instead of having students evaluate opposing arguments, I have them consider 6 common arguments that are often made by climate deniers, right? And then I have them read rebuttals to those arguments that are informed by leading scientific organizations, including the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the U.S. National Academy of Sciences. And then their last task in this module is to make an infographic designed to educate others and promote productive dialogue about the problem of climate change. And again, students share their infographic on a discussion forum. So just to wrap up here, the culminating assignment in the course is a final paper in which students write about the value of truth in a democratic society. And for this, students basically write about whatever critical thinking skills and concepts they think are most important for living together in our contemporary day within a democracy. It's basically an opportunity for them to synthesize what they've learned throughout the course. So to summarize and conclude, in my applied critical thinking course, students acquire the skills necessary to make effective arguments and thoughtfully respond to others in conversations about difficult topics. In other words, I teach them how to engage in productive dialogue. And I design application exercises that make students familiar with various arguments, often leveraged on either side of a debate, and give them factual information relevant to the topic. And I include documentaries because I think they really highlight the personal experiences and help to really humanize the topic and make it relatable to their lived experience. And then you have to give students an opportunity to practice these skills so that they'll have the ability to feel confident to have difficult conversations about controversial topics in the future. And my hope is that if we can really scale these skills up, if we all become better critical thinkers and better communicators, we should be less likely to fall into the traps of polarization and approach one another with receptivity and openness. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Well, as you can see, we've got just a handful of faculty members and my colleagues that I asked to participate, and there was many more I could have asked. So this is happening in classrooms across campus where we're trying to cultivate empathy, practice productive dialogue, and really make this a space where we are learning to be engaged citizens, learning to be better people so that we can build a better democracy. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I teach Repairing American Democracy, And there's lots of things that we can do, including institutional change, but one of the fundamental things is really just to become more small d democratic, which requires that we communicate and we engage with one another. And so I'm just so pleased to have the opportunity to share the work that's happening on our campus. And what I would like to do now is to kind of open it up and ask, especially the students out there, if there's a recent experience you had where you wish you may have handled a conversation differently, or you wish you maybe had some of these skills or training, or generally just any questions you have about how you might handle those dinners back home with your family when you go back, or questions about campus policies, or even some of my other colleagues that are out there, if you have stories that you want to share about the way that you help cultivate productive dialogue in the classroom. So please, I hope we have some questions out there, some feedback. And actually, let me get a mic. Can I give you a mic to pass around? And also, if you had a note card that you had a question written on it, Dr. Heiss can also collect that, and I'd be happy to read the question. You may have to turn the button, it'll hit green.
Hello. I think sometimes as an atheist, I have difficulty talking about religion with people while also trying to I don't know, I feel like sometimes when I bring up points about why me personally I'm an atheist, it almost comes off across as like I'm trying to poke holes in their faith. I just, how would you guys, approach a situation like that?
I came at it from the opposite. I studied political science at an evangelical college. Now, back before evangelicalism took a hard turn to the right. So we actually had lots of debates and discussions, but one of the things they told us is that even though your beliefs are based on your worldview, you can't assume other people share that worldview. So you have to find ways to communicate that doesn't assume a shared worldview. And so that's, I think, good rules for all of us to live in, right? Is to say when someone brings up based on their worldview, well, that's not a worldview I share. Are there other reasons why you might think I would find it compelling? Where I don't want to debate worldviews with you, right? Those are kind of articles of faith, even if they're atheistic faith, right? They're kind of where we've let our belief lie. But we can still have conversations, though we don't share those fundamental assumptions about the world around us. But I think acknowledging that with the other person, that we don't share a worldview on this, and that's okay, that it doesn't bother you not to share a worldview, your goal is not to challenge it. I think you talk about it directly, but say, I'd be interested in knowing how you think about this issue. I think one of the things in talking to students about it that often happens is, why do we want to have these conversations? If we want to have these conversations to change the other person's mind, or as you say, the assumption that you're trying to poke holes in their perspective of the world, then it's not going to be productive. Because if someone sits down with you that you don't really know and wants to tell you all the ways you're wrong, or even if they know you really well, that isn't going to change your mind, right? It's just going to make you defensive. So I think the trick when you have these conversations is to kind of reframe the lay of the land. I'm not trying to convince you. I'm just really curious about how you think about this and why you think about it the way you do. And if you frame it that way, I want to understand you, not I want to convince you you're wrong, then we're going to have much more productive conversations.
Just to follow with that, I think that's great. Those are skills that can apply to any conversation. Specifically on the atheism topic, I think that, as philosophers, world religions, I think that it's important to just recognize that people go through a lot of stages in how they understand something as big as the concept of God and, the origin of existence and all that kind of thing. So, some people go from being really religious to being atheists. Some people are atheists and then they discover a spirituality. And so just kind of recognizing that people's beliefs are evolving and just being kind of open to, oh, maybe I'll learn something and my ideas will evolve too. It kind of creates that humility and openness that actually kind of leaves space for a deeper understanding of the world.
Other questions?
I work as a political canvasser when I'm not in school, and this question is about that. So a lot of the people that I am asked to canvass are about as low as you can get on the economic scale of the amount of income that they bring in. So not only can a lot of them not get to the polls, but a lot of them don't even understand how our basic governmental system works. And so usually when I come to their house or wherever it is that they're living, or if I see them on the street and they want to talk to me, their question usually isn't tell me about the candidate, it's I don't understand why you're out here for this position because it doesn't matter. So I try and explain this to them, and it comes off as me being condescending. So I guess my question is, how do I relate this information, not being condescending, or the other thing that happens is that they go, oh, well, you saying that means your logic leads me to make me vote Democrat. That's not at all what I'm intending. I mean, I canvass for a Democratic candidate, but that's not where I'm going with most of the information that I'm giving them. So I just wondered your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Similar to kind of asking someone why they have the beliefs that they do or the worldview they have. It's listening, right? I mean, obviously, canvassing is your part. The skill of canvassing itself is listening. It's actually not promoting the issue or the candidate that you're there door knocking for. It's tell me what you care about. What is your life like? And so if it's someone that is lower income, let's say that they're struggling paycheck to paycheck, they can't afford child care. There are ways in which you can learn. They might not have the ability yet to articulate, oh, I don't like that Congress didn't pass this bill because they don't. But they are experiencing some challenges, some problems that can be addressed by government with their representatives collectively by joining some organizations. And so through that, you're kind of understanding, oh, I see you might not like politics, but you're hearing from them that they actually are deeply affected by politics, and you're educating them in some way. And I get the point about not wanting to come across as condescending, and that's why I think it's important that we have spaces where civic education happens, and it's why I love higher education, but it shouldn't be the only place where we educate about politics. It used to be, I mean, unions played a really important role for a lot of our history in promoting and actually learning about and educating about the political system. It happens in churches. In fact, part of this election preparation series, one of the other events that's happening is actually happening off campus. The Chattery, my colleague, Dr. Acuff, and actually my other colleague, Dr. R.J. Groh, are giving sort of one night, here's American politics, here's the structure of government in an hour and a half, right? And it's something that I'm interested in doing. And so I think there's ways in which we can educate, but you have to do that through listening first and kind of seeing what are the problems that they have, and you can help them articulate what it is that they're experiencing. I just want to commend you for doing that work. That's excellent. Thanks.
Okay. I don't know if this is gonna make sense, but a lot of my friends, like, I feel like when we talk about politics or like whenever it comes up, they are spitting out their parents' words that they have been told. And like I understand that you get a lot of your beliefs from what your parents believe, like I know I do, but I also have done my own like research and I've done all that stuff. And I was just wondering if you think there's a way that I could like say to them, not be like, hey, you need to like learn more, but like if there's a way to like encourage them to like not just believe what their parents are saying, but like actually look deeper and like see what they believe.
I'll take a stab at it, and then I know Dr. Derdorf can also speak to this. It is, so we know as political scientists that it varies, but roughly like 90% of children will adopt the political affiliation of their parents. And we know this is but we talk about agents of political socialization. It's getting students or getting citizens to understand that no one is born stamped Democrat or Republican or liberal or conservative, that we all are socialized into political views through these agents. Our parents are fundamental agents of political socialization, but so is higher education, which is why when you have that first semester as a freshman and you go home, your parents might be shocked that they're not the only ones now that are socializing one into politics. The church is another agent of socialization. The media, the times in which you grow up, the world around you, your generation is fundamentally going to be shaped by COVID and the lockdowns. It's just like prior generations were shaped by World War II, the Great Depression, Vietnam. And so I think you just have to get your friends to consider what it is that they care about and try to think about, well, you might you're learning about that from one agent of socialization. You don't have to use that language, but one of the things that also happens is when you go to college, besides the classroom experience, you are introduced to peers, particularly from diverse backgrounds. And so those are other agents of political socialization. And it might be that those friends are just reinforcing their worldview or their political preferences because that's truly how they feel, and those are the positions that they want to take. But encouraging them to consider that if they haven't seriously considered alternatives, I don't like to use the language of alternatives, but that there's other ways to think about issues by understanding where someone else is coming from and not being afraid to interact with difference in that way. And it's very challenging, but it is the case that a vast majority of citizens do go on to carry the preferences of their parents because they, from a very early age, are socialized not only to be Democrats or Republicans, but also to not care about politics or to be deeply invested in politics. If your parents were activists, either on the left or the right, you might be socialized into that. But if you grow up with the news never being on, always hearing that politics is just a racket, it's full of corrupt, bad faith actors, then you also are socialized into not caring about politics. But that can change, just like someone's relationship to religion can change. Socialization's happening constantly, so people are always going to be met with new stimuli and experiences that are going to shape that in really strange ways.
And I'll just add one really quick thing is that I think what you can do sometimes is just share your own story about how you came to arrive at your particular beliefs. And then maybe you can say, well, I used to think a lot like my parents, but then I started to, experience this. And maybe you're going to reference some of those different influences, and this, but personalizing it, and again, it kind of reminds me of what Dr. Walker was saying about I statements. When you speak from your own point of view, it's not like you're telling another person what they should do, but it's just giving them a different way of thinking that hopefully they'd be receptive to.
I would just add on to that change takes a long time. And you might have this conversation and you might not get the reaction that you had hoped for, and it might come much later. So that 2016 fall class really did not like me. And for a variety of reasons, but I introduced them to a lot of things that they were not ready for and that were very new to them. But interestingly enough, many of them found me later and then expressed how much they appreciated the different things that they learned in the class and the different viewpoints. And for some, it took a couple years to come around. But that kind of development and changing of belief systems and things like that can just take a long time. So telling stories and connecting with them on that level is really important, but also just being patient would be important.
Well, and I guess my question would be why change their minds? Maybe it's helping them understand why they think they believe what they believe, right? That's what you're looking for, is those deeper conversations, not just, well, this is what I've always believed, right? This is what I was taught. You want them to think about, why do you believe this? And that's the conversation that's the interesting one, right? So you claim this, well, help me understand why. What leads you to that outcome? And as they, as you're part of this process and we're part of this process, the idea is over time, they come to believe this for themselves, for their own reasons, right? Not just because this is what they were told that a good person believes. Yeah, please, sorry.
That's okay. I listen to a lot. So I advise our Student Government Association, and so we have students from all over the campus who have different viewpoints, and they come together, and occasionally they have those. I hear those conversations between the two of them, and I think it was said earlier, and I will challenge you to flip the roles and say that person may be thinking that I only get my viewpoint from where I came from. And I might be wrong. And so I've got what I talk to our students about, some little life rules that I go by. And one is enter into a conversation with the understanding that you could be wrong. And enter into that understanding, I think someone else said this already, that they are coming at this in good faith. And I think those two things, that maybe you call it humility and empathy together, really result in some amazing conversations when I tell students, hey, you need to flip the perspective a little bit, and let's put yourself in that role. They may be thinking the same thing about you, and so how do you frame that in a way that both of you can kind of start to talk about things, from a slightly different perspective?
Pass the mic around. Other questions?
But keep having those conversations.
Yes, exactly. Keep going.
They're going to be the most fun conversations you have.
Other experiences or questions? Oh, Bella's got a question. My Repairing American Democracy students are stepping up. There we go.
Yeah. I didn't have it fully formed in my mind yet, so forgive me if it's a bit open-ended. I was kind of thinking about experiences I had this summer. I had an internship. It was with the city of Chattanooga in the Neighborhood Services Division. I was writing a report, and so I was in charge of interviewing different neighborhood association leaders. I spoke with over 45, and it was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. I grew up in Chattanooga, so it was seeing all these different neighborhoods, like Hill City, Glass Farms, Bushtown, all these different places with so much history that I knew about but couldn't connect to. But as I was interviewing these people, sorry, I ran out of breath. As I was interviewing some of these association leaders, it was so incredibly clear that so many of them had more resources than others. And then there were associations that had only recently formed, they used to exist and came back. And there's all these people with questions and questions about the systems, that specifically I was interning for. And I had this frustration because it's I had limited information because of my position as an intern. I had limited resources to help them. And all I could really do to help them was report the condition of their neighborhood and their greatest needs to the division I was working for. And I guess my question is maybe I'll just share an experience. I had an exchange with the association leader of, I think it's okay to say the neighborhood, just Glass Farms, and I won't say the individual's name. this was only the second year that they had been doing these sorts of interviews, like in the internship position that I had. But the woman I was speaking to, she was like, to be totally honest, I haven't seen any difference in from the division. Like, any sort of difference has just been outreach and things like that. There's no change in the conditions of our neighborhoods. We don't feel more heard necessarily. And she said that she was afraid it would just become a process of just, she said, people like you talking to people like me, and nothing comes from it. And that was like completely valid, and I didn't know what to say to her. And I just don't know what to do with that experience, I guess.
So I used to do a lot of work in Mississippi, right? In the Mississippi Delta and in the city of Jackson, Mississippi, where, I worked and taught. And this was the case. They were used to people coming in, people who looked like me, coming in, asking questions, making promises, and not coming back. And so I think there's two things you have to do. One is understand that and own it. That yes, that happens. And so you realize that you have two choices. I was a professional, so I committed for time. So I did it for 2 decades for very deliberate reasons, because I didn't want to be one of those people who come in, get something out of it and aren't seen again. So I wanted to be seen as someone who invested and stayed there. But as a student, there's something a little different going on. The beauty of being a student is you're there to learn. That's your first priority. That's why you're a student. And I learned that my first study abroad, going into a town in the old city of Jerusalem and being asked, what country are you in? And saying, I know at least one of you has heard this story. And I went in and said, well, I'm in your shop. I'm in Palestine. Thank you very much. And he said, well, where do you think you are? And I said, I think I'm in your shop, and I think I'm in Palestine. And he kept pushing it. It's like, I'm a student. I have no opinions on this. I'm here purely to learn and learn from you. And I think in those circumstances, as an intern, that's the truth, right? I'm here to learn from you. I will communicate this back to the people above me and let them know you feel unseen and unheard, and I think that's a priority, but I'm a student, right? And I appreciate you sharing this with me, because you're right, you have limited power. But the fact you were there listening, and if it ends up in the report that you could share with her, it's something.
Yeah, thank you, Bella. Autumn, did you have a question?
Okay, so I think I talked to you, Dr. Strickler, in your class about this too, and I wanted to get other perspectives. But the problem of having a conversation with someone who refuses to look at the facts, and I was telling you, Dr. Strickler, my roommate's grandfather was like refusing to accept that climate change was real. And so I was like, how do you have a conversation with someone who just refuses to accept the facts? And if you can't have that conversation, how do you continue a relationship with someone who refuses to accept like bare minimum facts?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot, and I really think it's important to understand how people arrived at this view because of the amount of misinformation and doubt that has been sown. And so I think just strategies for having that conversation, I think in some ways you just have to be like, well, I'm not going to change their mind. They really are committed to believing this and to this viewpoint. But if you can kind of ask questions to understand why they believe that, maybe something will be uncovered in the course of that conversation, something where you might be able to gently insert a, not necessarily a correction, but just like a different way of thinking that you might have. Because I think people can really dig their heels in when they feel like, okay, we're having an argument. And so the conversation can't be like a debate like that. It has to, I think the best thing you can do is kind of like just realizing that takes a really long time for people to change their views, is to just have a better understanding of why someone has arrived at that position in the first place. Like, what are those influences on their political views? Where are they getting their information from? And then being able to talk from your own experience, like, well, you know, why you think climate change is very real, and why, you know, it's something that we need to think about, and especially as a young person who might want to have a family, like why this matters to you, you know. And I think the Catherine Hayhoe TED Talk that I mentioned that I have my students watch is very good, and you can Google it, and it helps to, one of her big emphases is to describe your shared values, because oftentimes, especially if it's someone that's close to you, maybe this person really loves nature. They like to go fishing or hunting, or you like to do like whatever. I mean, so you can, or they've experienced really extreme tropical storms or whatever. You know, it's something that you can kind of find a way in to just like creating a common ground where you can begin to have a more productive dialogue and not just have an antagonistic fight.
I have these conversations a lot with my dad, and they were easier pre-2016 to have, and I just have to remind myself that I love him very much, and that we have a lot of shared interest and values, and that I can't approach a conversation hoping to change his mind, because I'm not going to change his mind. So what we sometimes do is we find the gray areas where we have overlap. And we have been able to do that on quite a few topics that have been really interesting to me, that I did not anticipate that we would find it. And so I settle for that. I don't entirely avoid the conversation with him in the first place. But they're with him anyways, because we can have a conversation because we come from this shared place of loving each other and caring about one another. But there are certainly other people that we don't have that shared ground that I would not engage in those conversations with, and sometimes it's just not productive for your own mental health to engage in those, particularly if you're engaging in them with the purpose of trying to change somebody's mind. So know that even if you disagree with someone on these different things, you can still love them and you can still care about them, and it is still okay. They can still be a good person. And so those are sometimes some of the things that I just remind myself when my dad and I are ending a conversation and maybe we did not find common ground.
Yeah, remember, we have the family too. We all wrestle with this as well. You know, as a political scientist, when I meet people, or I have people from the community come to my office feeling the need to share their view of politics, which happens more than you would think. I've learned one thing that's helpful for me to kind of identify what kind of conversation we're going to have is I've learned to ask what evidence, what information, what piece of data would change your mind on this issue. You know, what would you need to know? And if their response is there's nothing, there's no evidence, there's no data, well, then you know you're not really having a conversation about policy with this person. This is an article of faith for them, right? This is this is part of their identity. Yeah, this is like religion for them. And so if that's the case, then you're going to have a very different conversation. And it helps. You know, okay, I'm going to pivot here. Now I'm just going to listen about why they feel this way and what is the fear behind it, because there's usually a lot of fear behind it. And if you can get them to talk about the fear, then maybe we can have a little more productive conversation about ways of kind of addressing the fear that underlies it. But it helps me because I quickly gauge what kind of conversation we're going to be having, and I know where not to put my energy.
Yeah, Sam.
In the vein of democratic backsliding, what are some of the ways that we can have productive conversations with people who like fundamentally feel that democracy just doesn't work? Like it's messy, they feel maybe personally betrayed. Like what are some tools that you can use to sort of address that question?
It's a good one. It is the case that on both, I always hate to both sides things, but on the left and the right, there's a decline in the principles and appreciation for democracy as a system. On the left, and it can be sometimes around climate change, that there are some who argue that we need a more powerful state and we might need to give certain forces power in order to do the transition that we need. And then of course there are some on the right who just do not believe in equality for all, and that in self-government, that there are some who believe hierarchies exist and there should be some who are some are better off ruling over others. You have to get people to think about what it is that they want for their life. I don't remember who said it. I think it's probably John Dewey, because I've been reading a lot of John Dewey. But there's nothing worse than giving up your ability to rule yourself, because then you're ruled by someone that could be worse than you, more or less. And so you really have to get someone to appreciate, like, what is it that you value, and do you care about having a stake in your life, in the way that you're governed, in the way that you surround yourself with others, and thinking about that there will always be bad actors out there. And it doesn't mean like doing a good versus evil argument, but that only through deliberation and dialogue can we really come to understand what it is that we truly want. And democracy is the system that allows for that. And so when you're talking with someone who says, it's all messy, I don't think, I don't trust my fellow citizens, I don't think they're smart enough to engage, that's really sad. And this is why everything about rebuilding democracy has to be centered around education. It goes to this point about the citizen who doesn't know, maybe can't name their representative, can't name any policy that's passed, but they're certainly being affected by politics. And so many people are upset about democracy because they feel like they actually don't have enough power. And the way to get more power is to mobilize collectively and to talk out what kind of world do we want to live in. We necessarily live in a society, and we have to come to terms with the fact that it's a pluralistic society. And the way to represent all of those interests is to give everyone a voice. And so I think you just it's more almost philosophical. You just have to probe with this person. What is it that what kind of life do they want? What kind of agency do they want? Or do they just want to be governed? And some people do, and we know that, but I don't think that's the way it should be done.
There's another hand up, but I just wanted to say that I've been this might seem like a tangent, but I've just been really heartened by seeing the way that communities have come together recently in response to the devastation of the recent hurricane. And like, we live together in a society, and we do care about one another. And I think that it's easy to get cynical and think that we're all just so divided and we have all these differences, and to really kind of lose faith in the idea of democracy. But I think that there is a brighter side, and that when we appeal to the better side of people, that we really do have the ability to come together and take care of one another and fight for change. And so let's not undersell our ability to do the hard work of democracy. I think it's possible. We just have to have the will and the desire to go for it. Yeah,
and I've also probably said this in class at some point, but one of the problems with our with democracy today is that we don't have enough of it. And so one of the reasons people turn away from it is they literally have not experienced democracy, not in its true potential. So anything wrong with democracy can be solved with more democracy. And I fundamentally believe that so much of our lives are lived in a way that we don't have agency over the way that we are living. And so we see it in the workplace, we see it even within forms of education, we see it in the economy. I believe that we just fundamentally don't have enough democracy, and so the only way you can build trust in it is to actually practice democracy. And when you don't practice it, you don't know how liberating it can be.
So just going off of everything that you guys have said, I was kind of that person that I've tried to avoid politics for like many years, and it's because it is so divided and it is so like conflictual that a lot of times it can just like bring you down emotionally and mentally, just draining. So I guess my question would be, how do you engage in politics, and how do you become part of the change for creating better democracy in America? How do you engage in a way, what are like practical ways that we can engage and be a difference and be part of the change without kind of getting dragged down?
It's a great question. Kind of two things I hear there. The first is the feeling that we are getting crushed by division, and we disengage because it feels so awful and there's landmines everywhere you go. And one of the points I was getting across my brief opening remarks is that I don't want to claim that we don't have division. But those divisions should be on policy. But we know that political elites, particularly at the party level, they want to sow that division. They want you to feel disengaged because there's an incentive to turn certain people off of politics. And so part of that is by design, and so we have to just recognize that this isn't the way politics has to feel. We have to be aware that there's an incentive structure that political elites can use to make us turn off from politics. And so to get engaged then, I think I study national politics, but I think engaging locally, finding an issue, or engaging locally and or finding an issue that you are passionate about. If it is the environment, it's getting involved in conservation efforts locally, or it's attending a lecture put on by someone from the city parks department, or if you're interested in the issue of gun violence, it's getting involved in an interest group. And that doesn't mean that you go lobby necessarily, but finding other like-minded citizens, you associate with them, you realize that I'm not the only one who feels this way, and there's things that we can care about. And change, as we've noted many times, change can take some time, but it also can happen rapidly. So I teach a public policy theory course, which kind of explains theories of how policy can take sometimes decades, if not generations, to change. But then other policy can switch on a dime when certain things happen, when people are mobilized to care about an issue. And so being primed for that, or we can always sort of be ready for that moment to come. And from the local all the way to the international, we can find ways to be engaged. If you're interested in foreign policy, you can, particularly if you're interested in like human rights, you can get involved with a local refugee organization or a local organization that helps bring refugees in. I think it's always easier to go to a place that you're comfortable, and usually that is the local. And there also is the potential, I don't think we'll see, but social media when it first emerged, was supposed to be the great leveler and was supposed to allow us to find these networks of mutual aid and care across wide expanse. And we've seen what social media has become, but that doesn't mean it can't change, that there aren't ways that we can connect across barriers, across borders, to locate people who are as passionate and who are as committed to issues that you are. And just recognizing that you're not alone itself can be really powerful. And claiming your sense of agency. That you're, one person, I'm not going to say, one person can make a difference, that sort of thing, but it's important that you recognize that if you are feeling this way, other people are as well. And it's collectively, when you get that sense, that you can do things in larger numbers.
So I had similar feelings in 2016, and that is when one of my lovely colleagues at the time told me about the League of Women Voters, and that's when I had gotten involved. So I would just put that organizations like that out there, and so I've been involved since 2016, both in Missouri, where I was originally, as well as here in Chattanooga, and just over the course of, I think from the spring, summer, and today was the last day for voter registration in the state of Tennessee, and so we helped as an organization register over like 2,500 people here in Chattanooga, both at UTC, Chat State, and like that helps, like seeing those numbers and seeing that impact that we are getting out there and we're educating voters. We're doing civic education programs in the community with like Girls Inc. and the Girl Scouts and things like that. Being engaged in that to the extent that you have the time and capacity can be really helpful, because being just like working with people that care about the same things that I care about. So that can be really energizing and healing in some ways. And so that I just encourage you all to find like that nook, that place, that organization that would give that energy back to you in that way.
One more thing, and then I'll hand it to you. One other thing to think about is how you engage in media consumption, right? And so as you're thinking about becoming politically involved, it's easy to tell yourself that you need to go old school, which is you're aware of what's going on all the time, and you're hyper engaged with with politics. I'm a political scientist, and I'm telling you, you don't have to do that, all right? I learned, it was in 2001, I know. But for me, that was a huge, I realized I couldn't do it. I couldn't do the 24/7, walk into a room and turn on CNN headline news the way I had been living my life, watching evening news. I just couldn't do it anymore. And so since then, so here's a political scientist who's done it for over 20 years. I go to the news. It does not come to me. I choose the outlets I go to. I choose when I do it. I choose what I'm looking at and who I'm listening to. And then if I need to do deep dives, I'll do deep dives. But I don't let it run 24/7. And I don't let it go to me, which means, frankly, I watch no TV news. I do it all reading because I control that. And that's how I've kind of managed it.
Yeah, I really like Dr. Strickler's, get local, and I would even say get hyper local, and because there probably is a partisan take on potholes, but I don't know what it is, and there's probably a partisan take on UTC dining, but I don't know what it is. So, if you get involved with our SGA and get into those issues that are impacting you right now, you're going to get with people and you're going to suddenly find out eventually that, oh my gosh, I've been talking to somebody about potholes and they have a completely different stance of me about the marginal tax rate. I don't know. So you're going to be talking about things that you agree with, and you're going to suddenly find out that you agree with somebody who disagrees with you on another issue. And that's a wonderful thing, because you're going to learn from each other. So, I think being involved on campus, the more involved you are, the more different types of organizations you are in, I think you can really become hyper local, and look around in the Chattanooga community. There's a number of things that you're going to find people who are invested in these things, and they're not really taking a partisan stance on it. I mean, you're citizens, you're in the community, and you care about the community. And I think that's really important. Find a community that doesn't really pay attention to or doesn't need to pay attention to some of those things, and you're going to discover people in a different way. And first of all, stop doom scrolling, all right? Just stop it. If you find yourself, when you're scrolling on TikTok and the person comes up and says, hey, you've been scrolling a lot, put it down. I don't do that either. I get stuck in it. But stop doing that. And then realize whenever I get stuck and think, oh my gosh, how bad it is, please remember we shot each other for 4 years in the late 19th century. I mean, things have been way worse than they are now. It's a wonderful time to live. It really is. We have air conditioning. And so really, I try to remember those things and remember that it's a wonderful place, and then get focus on those things that really impact you and your community. You're going to find people who disagree with you on other things, but are right beside you on that pothole in front of your house. So.
I think there was one more hand, one last question.
Hi. Coming from like a family in a town that's like really one-sided on politics, I always found myself like way more empathetic and had such a broader view on many things that my parents, family, town, friends believed. And like especially in high school and coming to college, I have found myself to agree with some other people, not completely change my view on things, but like just have been more understanding and like you're talking about empathetic, just a lot more than my family, and they can just not fathom that I understand what some of these people are talking about. So like how would you bring about maybe like trying to explain to my parents like in family and town like how I feel that way and why I feel that way?
Sorry, I'm trying to think through how you need to justify being an empathetic person.
I know it's hard. Like it's weird.
But yeah, it does. And so I do know that it's a thing. So I'm just trying to think through how I would blame school. Be like, my teachers are telling me that I need to do these things and think this way. But also, when I'm trying to talk with family members about that, I try to approach it in this way that like in order to be a good student, in order to be a good person, in order to be a good whatever like your future career and your profession is, I have to be able to approach things in this way. I have to be able to connect with people in this way. And the best way for me to be able to do this is to be able to find these connections and be open to listening to their ideas and understanding that people come to this world with a lot of different perspectives. And in that way, that might be one way that you can explain it. In order for you to do your job as a student and as a future professional, you have to be able to have these skills. It doesn't mean that they have to have these skills, but it definitely means that you have to. And if they want to learn them, then you would be very happy to like talk them through some of these practices of engaging in empathy. And most of those practices are also, they're very easy. They're just like being genuine and caring about others. So I maybe just blame your discipline and your future career path, and that's like a requirement and a necessity to be successful at it.
I'm majoring in education, so it's definitely something that I'm glad I have that for the future.
I think it's so essential that we just remind each other of our mutual humanity and like who are those people? I mean, what is that? I mean, that's just the language of polarization, that there's those others who are different. But we all need clean air and clean water. We all need food and shelter, and we have loved ones. If you have families and kids and pets, you care. You know, there's so much that we share. And so just to be able to listen and understand like, oh, well, this is their reasoning. This is why they take this position, because this is what they care about. And so just being able to explain that, I mean, just makes it, I think in my teaching, just being able to understand both sides doesn't mean that you are agreeing. It just means that you can see it from that perspective. And because they're another human and they have their reasons and their interests. So I think just backing away from that othering of people, and to be, that's part of the tribalism, and that, you know, you just can't identify with someone who's like a Republican or a Democrat because of this and that. It's like, well, you know, at the end of the day, we go home and we like pet the dog and have dinner. You know, we're not that different. So being able to find those just basic humanity is like, sadly, I guess we have to remind ourselves of that these days.
Great. Well, I want to thank you all for those excellent questions and for coming out tonight. And let's get a round of applause for our panelists here. So two notes. Please, food, brownies and cookies on the way out, grab some, and lemonade and water. And again, if you're interested in more events, Mocs Go Vote, there's a tab on the front page. And next Wednesday, we'll be having some talk on the election. All right, thank you.